Recording in progress. Great. All right. Well, welcome everyone. So happy to have you here today for our webinar about converting an existing grocery store into a food co-op. My name is Faye Mack. I am the Executive Director of Food Co-op Initiative called FCI. I use she, her pronouns, and we are a national nonprofit organization that helps folks who are working to start their own retail food co-ops. And personally, I'm based out of Vermont, so that's where I am calling in from today. Um, I'm really happy to have you all here. As I was saying earlier, we had 100 people register for this webinar within just a couple of days and have had over 50 other people sign up on the waiting list to receive the recording. So we're really excited. We have been asked to create this kind of tool and webinar for a long time, and true to form, there's a lot of interest in it. So it's really exciting. I'm very happy today to be joined by Blair, who's here from the Rural Grocery Initiative at Kansas State University, and by Stuart Reid, who's an independent co-op development consultant and also the former and founding executive director of FCI. So a familiar face to many of you as well. And I'll let them introduce themselves more fully when it's their turn to talk in a few minutes. First, I do want to take a moment and just do a little bit of gratitude. So this project was made possible with grants from the Cooperative Education Fund, which is a project of the Cooperative Development Foundation, and also from the USDA through a Rural Cooperative Grants Program, and also the generous support of operators across the country. So we're really grateful for the funding that made this possible. And also especially grateful to both Stuart Reid, who's here today, and Bonnie Hudspeth, who is not. They are the two primary authors of the action guide with support from both Blair or Erica and I in getting this done. It's been a really great cooperative effort, one might say. All right. So we're here today, right, to talk about existing grocery stores and how to think about converting them to a food co-op as part of succession planning and otherwise transitioning of a store. So we're going to spend some time today really walking through the process and introducing key milestones and key stakeholders. But just to set the stage about why we're here and why we're talking about this, I'm going to hand things over to Erica to just talk a little bit about what they're seeing across country with independent grocery stores.
Great. Thank you so much, Faye. Really happy to be here today. Happy to see all of you and really glad that we could partner with the Food Co-op Initiative on this guide. So just a quick overview of the Rural Grocery Initiative. We are housed at Kansas State Research and Extension. And as you can surely tell by our name, the whole reason that we exist is to support rural grocers because they provide so many important benefits to our communities, economic, health, social benefits, and not just in rural communities, of course, but urban communities as well. So just in a nutshell, what we do is we speak with grocers, we speak with communities that want to open grocery stores, help them think through options, help point them in the right direction, and develop resources like the one that we are here to talk about today. Next slide. So just to set the stage, as Faye said, I'm just going to take a moment to talk about what we all already know, and that is that local and small businesses are vital for both urban and rural communities. So just a few points to highlight this. Almost half of the workforce in the US is employed by small businesses. There have been numerous studies that show that when people spend their dollars at local businesses, those dollars circulate more within the community compared to if those dollars were spent at a chain. So, you know, they have a lot of importance in terms of driving our local communities, local economies, but they are also building the fabric of our communities as well. So they are involved in community events. They are creating spaces where people can come together and connect. So they play such an important role, and that just can't be overstated. And I know that that's not something I need to convince this audience, but just wanted to acknowledge that. Another a trend that I wanted to highlight is that across the country, about half of the privately owned businesses with employees are owned by the baby boomer generation. So the youngest people in that generation are 58 and the oldest are 78. So that means that there are a lot of business owners right now across the country and across different industries that are going to be retiring soon. So the question is, what is going to happen to all of these businesses? Who will take them over to ensure that they can continue operating and serving our communities? Business transitions take time, that they don't happen overnight. It takes a lot of planning. And in some situations, for example, in many of the communities that we work in, it's just hard to find a buyer. There's just a smaller pool of potential buyers. So that can present some challenges too. So this is something to be proactively thinking about and planning for, to get the best outcome for business owners and the communities that they serve. So just to put this in some more context, with the work that the Rural Grocery Initiative does, in 2021, we conducted a survey of rural grocers in Kansas. And these were grocers in communities of 5,000 or less. And we found through that survey that about a quarter of them anticipated retiring in the next 1 to 5 years. However, 70% of that group did not have a plan for the future ownership of their store. So this was concerning to RGI. We realized this is an area where more support is needed. We've seen situations where a grocer has really delayed retirement beyond what they were hoping for to keep the store open, or the store eventually closed without a successor. So the community was left without access to food. So, you know, we realized here's an area where RGI can provide some support, and that's really, we've focused on that quite a bit over the last few years. So this slide just highlights some of the work we've done to support grocers through transition planning. We have conducted 2 webinar series on this topic. So we've covered things like business valuation, funding the transition, building your team. And also we've highlighted real world examples of grocery business transitions. And so all of those recordings are available on our website. We also had a mentorship program where we paired grocers and communities with a mentor to get one-on-one assistance on a specific business transition project. We had over 40 individuals participate during this program. So I think that really highlights the need for this kind of support. And then more recently, we have developed an online course, this Rural Grocery Specialist program, which is really designed for resource providers to help grocers navigate this process. So this is all really just to say that RGI really believes that this is a really important issue. We've invested a lot of time into providing business transition support. And this is exactly why we partnered with the Food Co-op Initiative to develop this new guide on co-op conversions. When we talk to grocers and communities about their options, we talk to them about community supported models like the cooperative model, because we see this as a viable option that can keep the local grocery store alive. So again, that's kind of the overview of why we're here today. Really, again, excited to be part of this project and hope that it helps communities across the country plan the next chapter of their local grocery store. So with that, I'm gonna, I think, turn it back over to Faye so we can start looking through the guide.
Thank you so much, Erica. And just a quick note to just introduce FCI a little bit, since there are some folks here who didn't come from our email list, which is always really exciting. So Food Co-op Initiative, as I mentioned before, we're a national nonprofit organization, and we support all kinds of communities and individuals who are interested in starting a retail food co-op. And for some of those, that's converting an existing grocery store. For some, that's starting from scratch and then finding an existing grocery store to convert. And so these are just some pictures up here of co-ops, and what I was noticing is that two of them have just opened in the last year, which is really exciting. So folks do go from start to open. We provide resources, educational opportunities like this to learn about the process and to dive into different pieces of detail. We're also the co-host for the national conference for startup food co-ops called the Up and Coming Conference. I mention it because registration will open in about a month, and it's being held in Kalamazoo, Michigan this September. So I hope that some of you will consider coming to the conference. We also support other kinds of learning and connection opportunities, and you can learn all about it on our website. And most importantly, we and Erica and her team are the folks to reach out to after you read our great new guide and decide you want to get started. So I hope to talk to you all in the coming months. And so before I hand it over to Stuart to start walking through this process, just to say again, that what we're talking through today is a new action guide. We will be sending it out afterwards. This guide and this webinar are meant to give you an introduction to what you need to know, to get a sense of the process, the stakeholders, and the timeline, and to know that the guide is filled to the brim with lots of links to other resources where you can dive into more detail about all of that. So today we're going to talk a little bit about why you might consider a co-op conversion, and a bit of that process. So I'm going to turn it over to Stuart to walk us through that journey.
Hey, I remember to unmute myself. I'm out of practice doing webinars. It's been a year and a half, I think, but let's see what we can do today. I am Stuart Reid. I've been involved with food co-ops since the 70s. Semi-retired now, doing some independent consulting, and was really honored when I was asked to help put together this action guide. So that's enough about me. What exactly are we talking about here? What is a co-op conversion? Essentially, it's as simple as when any business, and we're talking food grocery stores here, is purchased by a group of people that want to own it as a cooperative. So you're just buying a business and converting the business structure to that of a cooperative. It's not that complex in a lot of ways, but there's good reasons for why you might want to do that. Okay, next. So Faye already introduced the new action guide. That's the lovely cover. It's meant to be an overview. It's meant to be guidance. It's not meant to tell you how to do absolutely everything you have to do along the way, because honestly, we don't think you should do everything. There are things that really require people with high levels of expertise to become involved, and I'll talk about that as we go through that. Go ahead. Yeah. So what exactly are we talking about here? What is a cooperative? I think this little picture from the Monadnock Food Co-op on the right of the screen, this is from their website, I believe, and it really explains very well what people are looking for and why a co-op is important to them. Every co-op can set their own vision and mission because it's an independent business. It's made for and by the people that use the services. So you can define what is important to you and how your co-op should serve its market, its community. But one of the important aspects of it is that when you invest in a co-op, you don't do it because you're hoping to make a mint when when the first IPO comes out. It doesn't happen. Your initial investment and any future investments will always be equity in the co-op that will just come back at the same level should you leave the co-op and ask to have your money back. You're not going to make money. You are going to be an owner of a business, and you could get patronage rebates when the co-op is profitable. But it's not an opportunity for somebody to work the stock market by any means. Also, no matter how much you invest in the co-op, should you choose to, you will only get one vote. So it's very democratic in its the way it is operated and governed. Each member gets a vote to elect a board of directors, which generally takes care of most of the business of the co-op. Otherwise, we've got co-ops with 10,000 or more members, and you really aren't going to expect them to be doing the day-to-day decision making. So that's really a simplified version, but that's what a co-op is all about. Why would you want to choose a model that most people might not be that familiar with? Well, probably for some of the reasons I just said. Because it's a business that is responsive to your community. It's a business that you have a stake in personally. It's a business that you can really come to love. And it becomes a social hub. It becomes a gathering place. It's more than just a grocery store. There's so hard to define all the values that make co-ops important in their communities. But among others, I've seen co-ops come into neighborhoods that were a little down at the heels, and over a decade or two, the whole neighborhood turns around because of the involvement of people and the interest and the fact that there is a viable business that serves the needs of the community. So there's a lot of good reasons, but I hope it isn't the reason you have to use, but it's really true that sometimes, especially in smaller rural communities, you might not have very many other options, if any. You may choose to do a co-op because nobody else is willing to come in and buy the store that's going to be left behind by its previous owners. So it's a way to save a store when there isn't a ready buyer by becoming the buyer as a group of people in the community. Okay. So it's a big process, and how to get started on something like this. Well, the idea, you're starting right now by learning a little bit about it. And I always tell people the first thing you need to do is talk to Food Co-op Initiative and the Rural Grocery Initiative. Find out what you need to know so that you can explain what a co-op is to people in your community who aren't familiar with it. Then the other thing, if your plan is to do a conversion, you're going to have to find something to convert. So you have to identify a grocery store, and frankly, a lot of times that's what starts the process, is that there is a grocery store for sale in the community, and people are concerned that it might close. You've got to talk to that owner or owners and find out what their interest is in working with the community group, what their timeline is, which is really can be problematic in some cases. You get a group of people together to start doing all the legwork and start really talking to your community. Because it's community-owned business, your community has to understand it. They have to become involved. They have to want what you're doing to be successful. Okay. Somebody has a cursor on the screen, which is a little bit distracting. If you can move that off, thank you. So the building a team is as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. A lot of times it starts with a group of people sitting around the table saying, hey, what are we going to do about the store that's closing? We really don't want to be a small town or a neighborhood in a big town, for that matter, without a grocery store. We don't want to have to drive 40 miles to the nearest grocery store. So what are we going to do about this? And the idea of a co-op may come up then or later, but you need, well, however you're going to address it, you're going to need a group of people, not just, it's more than one person is going to ever want to try to do. Plus, it's just what a co-op is about. It's a group of people working together. So you'll find people that are interested, that have time they can commit, that are good at reaching out, talking to the community, You want your group to be representative of the people in the community. If you've got a diverse racial mix or a diverse population in other ways, economically or whatever it is, if you want the whole community to shop at the store that you're creating, you want them to be involved in the creation of that store as well. So start right at the beginning with as inclusive a group as you possibly can in building a steering committee and team. Do a lot of listening. I mean, you want to do a lot of talking too, because you have to explain things, but shut up and listen. You need to hear what people are talking about and what their concerns are so that you can be prepared to address them. And then finally, as part of that first step, a vision statement is really important so that you can explain what it is you're trying to do, and you can, everybody that's talking about it is talking about the same thing. That's very, very important, that it's not everybody that has thought about the co-op has a slightly different vision of what it's going to be. That's going to be confusing and it's going to be problematic. So come to some agreements, come to a vision that reflects the needs of your community, and then use that as your talking point or your core place that you come back to when you have a question about what do we do about this? What's the right decision? Well, does it help our vision? Does it help us get to our vision? Yes or no? Next. So community engagement. You're going to need the community to shop at the store. I mean, that's the very obvious. You're also going to need a lot of people to help get to a point where you can purchase and open a store, or keep a store open if it's already still running. One of the flies in the ointment, if you will, is that sometimes the owner of the store doesn't want to be public about the fact that the store is for sale or that there's a potential deal on the table. They may be concerned about people not shopping anymore because they know the store might be closing. They might be concerned for other reasons. They've put their life into this business. You have to respect that confidentiality. But realistically, it makes your job way harder if you can't talk about what you're doing until you've got a signed agreement with the owner. So if at all possible, you want to have that agreement that it's okay to talk about it. And if there's some restrictions or some things that the owner says, I just don't want you to talk about this or that, you're just going to have to respect that and work around it. But you need a well-planned out campaign of community engagement in order to make sure that people understand what you're doing. Once again, going back to that vision, what are you doing? What does it mean to them? What are you going to ask from them, including an investment in the co-op so that you can purchase the assets and keep it open or reopen it as the case may be. Next. There we go. Okay, so moving along, you've got a potential site, you've got a steering committee, you're starting to talk to the community, get them excited, get them involved. Is this store that is being sold going to be successful in the future? Not, you might want to assume that it was up to now, so why not? Well, I'd rather you didn't do it that way. Do your due diligence. Let's look at what it takes to evaluate feasibility. Is the store going to be viable? It doesn't have to be highly profitable because investors aren't demanding a high return. It's there to serve the community. And if it can do that and break even, then it's meeting the needs of the community. But in order for it to be feasible, you have to be able to break even at least. And so what are the things that you're going to be looking at? The existing infrastructure, is it going to need a lot of repairs? Is it going to need upgrades for electrical? Is it going to need new equipment, which is very common in older stores? Take a look at the financial history. If the owner can share that with you, and he or she should. Historical financials are important in showing what the past costs and revenues have been. But you also want to look at what they will be in the future. And they might not be the same depending on whether you make changes to the store, whether there's changes in the local market, more competition, for example. If there's a dollar store that doesn't serve the community with fresh food or even very healthy food, but it's there, that'll change the financial projections of the storefront. So suitability of the site might not be an issue. I mean, it's there, it's always been there, right? If you expect it to grow in the future, though, is there room for that? Something to think about. Also, who's going to manage this? Well, that's all right, I'll move faster. Who's going to manage the store? Finding a manager for a small grocery store isn't always easy, and managers are incredibly important to the success of the store. A good manager who can work with, knows the finances, knows how to market the products in the store, knows how to work with the staff, knows how to work with the community. There's a lot of skill sets that are needed to be a good store manager. And finally, you have to be able to get the money somehow, somewhere. Okay. So there's specific tools that we usually use and that we always recommend in assessing how feasible, and by feasible, again, what I mean is if a store is feasible, it means it's likely to be able to be profitable, at least minimally, and to be able to survive. So you definitely want a positive feasibility analysis. So to determine that, you want to know a few things. A market study will look at your community and the area around your community where people might come to shop at the store and project how much revenue the store could generate in a year, based on all kinds of factors that are hard to figure out for the average person. I would never do a market study, I'll tell you that. And that's one of the areas where we recommend that you hire somebody. Now, if almost nothing has changed in the last 5 years, or you don't expect anything to change, you've got good historical financial projections from the current owners, you might get away without doing it, but it's still recommended. The sources and uses budget is a major tool for the planning. It's going to identify all the costs that you'll incur to take over ownership and fix anything that needs fixing, upgrade anything that needs upgrading, promote the store, pay people but before the store is running, all kinds of things that are included in there. So you want to make sure you keep that into all of those things in mind so that you know how much money you need to raise. And then the sources side of that is where you're going to raise all that money. We have FCI with Colluminate and FCI both share a tool mostly created by Colluminate that is a sources and uses budget template that'll give you a good starting point because it'll help you remember all the possible costs that you might not have thought about. So one of the many tools that we recommend. And then finally, you're doing every startup, whether it's a conversion or starting from scratch, needs an operating budget. So in other words, what's it going to look like after the store is open and running? How much money are you going to make? What are your expenses going to be? What does your balance sheet look like? What's your cash flow, which is incredibly important because you can actually lose money and still have a positive cash flow, and you usually will for the first year or two in a new business. And the debt service, among other things, that will be included in a full pro forma. But those tools put together are a large part of determining whether your store can be successful, assuming that you follow through on the things you said you were going to do when whoever does these studies does them for you. Okay, next. So I'm not suggesting that this might be the only decision point, but this is really probably the big one. At any point along the way, you might realize that, hey, we just don't have it. The store is in such bad shape, it isn't worth fixing it up. We hear there's another market coming to this town 10 miles away that'll be too much competition for us. Whatever the reason, you may decide at any point along the way that it doesn't make sense to keep going forward. And don't think of that as a failure. You've learned a lot. You've got people in the community working together for a common goal, and that can carry over into other areas of your life and your community. So it's always a positive experience in my mind. But at some point, you've got to decide whether you're going to commit hundreds of thousands of dollars or even into the millions of dollars, depending on the size of the store, on a project that you, with the money from the people in your community being a major part of that. You don't want to make a bad decision. So you need to review all that research we just talked about. Think about how big the risks are, because no matter how good your market study, there's always risk. Something can happen that you weren't expecting. How strong is the community support for the project? And can you raise the capital? If your answers to those questions are positive, then as a group, you're probably by this time incorporated and you'll have a board of directors. You'll make a vote, or you might even include your whole membership in that vote, but you're going to make a decision to go forward or not. Okay. Once you've done that, now we're getting into the point of no return, which is why that go, no go decision is so important. The next step is typically to make an offer. And in order to do that, you have to have an idea of how much the business is worth. It isn't, what the business is worth is not the same thing as the owner's selling price. You need to evaluate it yourself. There's a lot of things that an owner might feel strongly about that may not really be that important, like goodwill is a line item on a lot of valuations. How do you, it's a very intangible thing that just says all the years of doing this business and all the people that support it, I've built up goodwill, it's worth something, which is true, but how do you put a value on that? How much is the property worth? Are you going to be leasing? Or are you going to be buying? Is the equipment in good condition? If you're leasing, who's responsible for repairs? Or all of these things have to be taken into account. And very important is that whatever offer is made has a contingency clause to cover the co-op's need for raising capital. You're going to be making an offer probably before you've finished raising capital. So if you are not able to raise the capital in a timely manner, and so the contingency will usually be time constrained. If you can't raise the capital by the end of the time period in which the owner is willing to wait, then the offer is void. So that's to prevent you from getting stuck in a contract that you cannot reasonably complete. Okay, next. I will just, you don't have to change the slide back, but I just really want to emphasize that there is a lot of money left on the table in lease negotiations and purchase agreements. It's really an area where I recommend that you do your research, find somebody that's done business, lease, or purchase negotiations, get the help you need to do it well, and make sure you get the best possible deal, because that's going to impact your expenses in many ways going forward. Okay, so raising capital. The fun part. Okay, let's go back to being a co-op. People join a co-op, and traditionally we've called them members. We like to think of them as owners as well, because that's really the truth of the matter. When you join the co-op, you buy a membership, or you buy an owner share, or whatever you call it, that you're buying. What that is actually an equity investment in the co-op. You're investing somewhere typically between $100 and $300 is the cost of a share. Sometimes those are over time, sometimes it's all at once. But that's money that you're putting in that makes you the owner and gives you your vote in the co-op. So A smaller community, you may only expect to have a couple of hundred owners at $100 a piece. That's not a lot of money, but it's an important starting point. In a large community, which frankly, there aren't as many conversions in large communities because of the costs involved tend to also be higher. You might have many more owners, though, that will help build that up. Still, that owner share portion is, while it's essential, is a small part of the total budget. Most co-ops will ask the owners that they have if they would be willing to make a loan to the co-op or if they would purchase preferred shares. Preferred shares are larger amounts, usually $500 to $1,000, that can pay a dividend, but they do not come with extra voting power. They're non-voting shares. So owner loans can be loans that a person can afford to make to the co-op for anything from $500 on up, typically at rates that are well below bank rates, money market, but enough that the person making the loan feels good about it and understands that they're helping get this business started. So that can, some co-ops finance themselves almost entirely with just those three things, or two of the three. But it's easier by far if you can get free money, grants and donations. You're not a charitable organization as a co-op, so donations are not tax deductible to the donor. Grants may be available from a variety of sources. Some of them require that you be a 501c3, a charitable organization. Some of them don't. USDA has grants for rural development, for example. But you can work with a fiscal sponsor, an organization that is a charitable organization, to bring in money on your behalf and pass it through. Check that out. If you have people that are interested in making large donations, that can be a way to facilitate that process. Then you're going to get into the market rate lenders. Co-op lenders are market rate, but they have a better understanding and a desire to work with startup co-ops and food co-ops of all kinds. There's a few of them around the country, and they would definitely be somebody that you would want to talk to. Then you've got commercial lenders, which would be your local bank would be the first place I'd go, but it could be another bank, wherever you're doing your business. And while it's still a kind of an iffy proposition, you may be able to get an SBA-backed loan. They've been working for several years now to work out the details on how consumer-owned co-ops can get SBA loans. And at this point, it's still difficult. And then finally, something that a lot of people forget about or don't know about, but it's really important, is seller financing. The seller can take part of the payment for the business over time, essentially making a personal loan to the buyers. And this is very common in small business sales. So it's not like you're asking for something exotic. It's something that an owner should be prepared to consider, and it could be a significant part of your capital, in fact. So those are the most common sources of capital. There's nothing's off the table as long as it isn't illegal. Buying lottery tickets works, but only if you're really, really, really lucky. So I don't recommend that, I guess. But anyway, next slide. Okay, so up to this point, you've been marketing the project to your community, explaining what a co-op is and getting them involved in helping to do the legwork, getting them involved in raising capital. But just within a month or two, at least, maybe longer, before you're actually ready to take ownership and open the store as your new co-op, you need to start shifting that marketing to promoting the store itself, the products in the store, the services in the store, why everybody should be excited to come and see it. And so you can do that through social media. You can do that by getting free press from local press, which are usually happy to promote new businesses or write up new businesses. Think about all the ways you can get the word out in your community. yard signs, window stickers. I mean, every co-op has come up with a plethora of creative ways to do this. And you really want to put some time and energy into it. And it should be part of your budget also for the startup. Don't be afraid to spend a little money on this because you need to make an impact when the store opens. A lot of suppliers can help out either with doing in-store demos or donating some product for a festival day or whatever. But this is really important. Make sure people get in the store, and you want them to have a good experience when they come. If they have a bad experience, they might not come back. So training your staff, being prepared for that opening day so that people can come in and have that good experience is really important. Okay, next. So there you go. You're ready for opening up. And it is so much fun. Let me tell you, it is a blast to have that first day when you open the doors and people are just wanting to see what you've got and oohing and eyeing and congratulating you and everything else. So look forward to it, enjoy it, but we do recommend, the first opening is a soft opening, not the big party opening, but a chance for people to come in and shop, see the store. That's not to say it's not a party, but you're not promoting it as this huge big deal yet. You want to have a chance to fix some of the things that will inevitably go wrong because this is your first day. Of course, things are going to go wrong. As few as possible, we hope, but give yourself a month, a few weeks, whatever, to work out the kinks, and then have your grand opening, really big party, and just blow the roof off. Okay, next.
All right.
So I will add one more thing. Your
yeah.
job as a board and organizing team isn't entirely over after the store opens. Now you have to govern the store. You have to fix problems that occur. You have to watch the finances. You have to oversee the manager. I hate to break the news to you, but your job isn't over with the big party. But do be cognizant of that there is still work to be done. Okay. Enough bummer.
That's great. I'm going to stop sharing for a few minutes as we open it up for some conversation and questions. We did get one question. Suzette, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your questions? We got some more voices in here, or I can read it.
Sure, yeah. There's just been a general interest in exploring whether it makes sense to have a worker and a consumer class of membership, and I was wondering how that was, if it's included in the guide or if you have any other particular thoughts pertinent to that.
It's not specifically addressed in the guide. We do talk about the different ways that a co-op can be owned and mention that hybrid ownership is an option. It's very for a conversion. I haven't seen one. A lot of times most of the conversions have been smaller co-ops, and workers ownership hasn't been a big interest, either because of lack of funds to invest or timing of the whole process, or the fact that the workers are gone by the time the co-op takes over. So, I mean, I think it's a great concept, and it might be something like, even like some of our other food co-op startups like Durham Market, something you would phase into after opening, with the consumer class being responsible for getting the startup going and workers later. Now, if you had a strong group of workers with some funds, I think that would be an excellent opportunity for a conversion. I just haven't seen it. So we don't spend a lot of time in the guide because it would be going too much deep in the weeds, but there are other resources that do talk about that.
Great. And Erica just put a webinar link on worker-owned grocery co-op, and I believe that some folks in Montana are also working on some tools as well. So there may be more to come soon.
Yeah.
Cindy.
Hi, everyone. We are actively, grocery store conversions is something we've done a lot of. I put this up in the chat as well, but the number one thing we run into when we're transitioning an open store from one ownership team to another, which we're on our third right now in Nebraska, that we run into some real legal and tax issues when you go from one ownership group to a cooperative ownership group. And that first ownership group is going to maintain ownership within the second group. Do you address that in your guide, Stuart?
No, that would be on the detail level that we go into. Plus the fact that, like you said, it's state by state in many cases. So we're not gonna go into the legal recommendations.
Sherry, yeah, you're muted still.
Sorry about that. We have a current health food store that has a very loyal following. We've signed up at least 200 people from that following who want to be members, and we just got our no, I'm not talking to you, and we just got our cooperative corporation papers approved. So we're having a big meeting in a few weeks. We're going to start signing up members. So we have, a core group. We have a board of directors of 6 people, and they're all fabulous. And then we have, maybe another 10, 15 people who are really involved. And then we have the member level, and it feels like there's a big, and then we have some people who are willing to, to come in and volunteer or work for a discount for, a few hours a month, that kind of thing. But it feels like there's a big gap between people to just ask them to sign on the dotted line and become a member, which I think will get a lot of people to do, and the people who are super involved. And we're trying to sort of brainstorm about what other kinds of, I mean, I know that there's a lot of worker laws that are, some are federal, some are Massachusetts, that you can't just hire people who would, you can't have volunteers who would be doing things that staff would otherwise be doing. So we have to be very careful about that. But so I'm on the outreach committee. I want to get volunteers who will table and who will, spread the word. But besides that, do you have ideas of other ways we can engage volunteers at more than the membership level, but less than hours a week?
That's a whole webinar or two. In fact, we do have, I think Food Co-op Initiative has a couple out there. Faye, do you want to address that one maybe?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think that's a question that all co-ops ask all the time, right? How can we engage our members more and more, including the ones that are open? And there are so many ways that, as Stuart said, it is a bit of a whole other conversation. There are some resources. Sherry, I could poke around and maybe send you a couple afterwards, but if you check out our resource library on our website, there's definitely some things. One thing I would suggest, in addition to, the tabling and the outreach on behalf of the co-op that you're doing, finding other ways for folks to give back and support their full community under the hat and the umbrella of the co-op is a great way to engage owners and also continue to promote the co-op as a center and a hub of the community. So maybe that's like in Vermont, we just had Green Up Day, which is an annual trash collection day. Getting a team to do something like that, if there are festivals in your town or farms that do gleaning, things like that, where there's a way to kind of give back to the community, which also has engages your members, really connects to the principles of cooperative, and has the added effect of advertising your co-op. It's a really great place. So that might be something where it's not so much around the operations of the co-op, but really just helping people get out there with your hat on.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Faye. I always seem to ask a question that's a little off topic for the particular webinar.
I see a question coming in from Lisa. Lisa, do you want to unmute and ask, or I can also just read that out as well?
Yeah, I don't know. Is my connection okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so we're trying to figure out best way to hire a GM, a new GM. And I keep hearing that it's really hard to do. So I'm wondering for advice.
Do you have a budget for the process?
Well, that's part of the problem. We don't
Okay.
know what to budget. We don't know how to look. Like if you can give us just a walkthrough what the process would be.
Well, there's also a webinar out there for that, a recorded one. And it's a kind of a process. I mean, you need to go through an internal process of identifying what the qualities are that you most need, which are the most important ones in a manager, and what are the bonus point qualities or skills or experience. And make a clear job description and get it out in the right people's hands. Now that can be problematic. Now, if you don't expect someone to be willing to relocate, then you're just going to want to promote it in your own area. If you're a larger co-op, they'll usually do a national search. And
Oh,
if you,
let me clarify my question then, because I guess what I meant was in terms of the transition from an existing store that's still
Yeah.
open,
still the same,
yeah. So how do you, if the owner is the GM and you're transitioning to where you have a new GM, what's the easiest way to have that transition be smooth? Because I can imagine that like the current owner may have kind of a sense of ownership, obviously. And how do you, what's the like, should you just say, okay, we're done? Like what's kind of typical overlap process, I guess is my question, you know?
not sure if there's a typical. If the owner is willing to help mentor your new GM, that could be very valuable, assuming that they get along and the leaving owner isn't totally convinced that nobody in the world knows what they're doing except him or her. But so that kind of mentoring, at least showing them, here's the suppliers, here's the order schedule, here's how we do our books, here's the promotional schedule. I mean, just those little detail things, rather than reinventing them, could be very valuable. And it might not have to be the owner. It could be one of the staff that stays on that's familiar with some of that. But if you have to hire someone and you don't have an owner to mentor, and the person you hire doesn't really have the full box of tools, you can get consultants that will work with that new manager to help bring them up to speed, or or even get interim general managers, consultants that do that, take the whole job on and then work with whoever you hire to transition them. But that's why I asked about budget. There's consultants that will help you with the whole hiring process. There's consultants that will help with the training. There's consultants who will be the GM. So, but all of those things are, they come with a pretty significant price tag. You get good value for your money, but you have to have the money to do it.
I would just add that, I mean, this is one of those things what the actual transition looks like is going to be so dependent on each community and on the person who's leaving, right? If no matter what, one of the I think the trickiest parts about this kind of transition is that after the transition, when you're running your wonderful co-op, some things are going to be the same as it was before, and some things are going to be different. And that's how it works. And some people are going to be really excited for lots of change, and some people are going to want the exact same store that they have been shopping in for the last 45 years. Thank you very much. And it doesn't need a facelift. And that transition, is going to be a transition for the whole community. And true for the owner, the original owner, especially if they're still in that community, even when they come in as a shopper, right? It's anytime there's a big transition in leadership, it's emotional. It can feel really personal. And so I think too, just to keep in mind that in the transition, I'm so sorry. Smudge. UPS arrived. keep in mind that with the transition, so for some owners, it might be easiest and best to make a clean break. And for some, they might want to stick around for 4 months and help with training and help with identifying all the quirks. And the incoming GM might like that, or they might also just want to be able to be on their own. So it really depends there. So it's 2:59. Like I said before, we are able to stay on for just a few minutes. So I'm going to wrap us up before we end by giving you all the link to the new guide. So I'm going to share my screen again. So you have this up here, and we'll send out an email in the next, or actually, you're getting a survey in your inbox right around now, and in that is a link to the action guide. So you also are getting that into your email. If some of you haven't been seeing some of our emails, they occasionally go into spam because they come from our database management system. And so check your spam box. This might be where some of the reminder emails went. But you will get a survey, very, very short. Please take it. It really helps us as we think about how we do these in the future. And you will get the guide. It's also in the FCI resource library on our website on the Getting Started page. So go read that, reach out to us, reach out to Erica and her team at Rural Grocery Initiative. We're here to help you. We're really excited by your conversion in your community, and I'm excited to talk to you about it. I also really want to thank Stuart for leading this webinar today and for your work on the guide, and you as well, Erica. Thank you all for being here. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording. I can.